So welcome everybody to another series of BIMA's Web3 Talks. We're here today with Mark from OPENFORMAT. Mark is going to teach us through what it takes to be in this space from an agency perspective, from his background outside of OPENFORMAT, but also you'll learn a lot about what OPENFORMAT are, and especially in the developer no-code and gamification side. So welcome, Mark. Could you just give us a brief background about who you are and how you came to OPENFORMAT as well?
Okay, so I've been a techie forever, since the late 90s. First startup in 96, 97. Been on the startup journey through that, and then started an agency in about 2007, I think, which was called Simple Web, and ran that for 15, 16 years. And that in itself was an interesting story, which I know we're not here to talk about, but during that time, we always did things differently. We always wanted to do what, I mean, I've never had a job, so I didn't know what you're supposed to do. So we just ran that agency how we would want to run anything ourselves, kind of thing. And we were always interested in playing with new tech, interesting tech. So, you know, Bitcoin came along 2012, 2013, and I wrote a white paper. No, that's not true. I would call it a white post-it, not a white paper. That's true, you've got to be honest. And on the potential of Bitcoin as potentially a way for delivering media, you know, so that we could have non-fungible media, basically, so we could bring back music as records, which had finite and tangible releases rather than the Spotify infinite stuff. So yeah, so we just kind of played with lots of interesting tech and got to about 2017, I think, just before the pandemic. And we'd already been doing lots of blockchain stuff because the technology is so interesting. But we were never interested in the crypto nonsense, you know. Yeah, crypto bro, yeah, fell to the moon. Like, not interested, just not interested in any of that stuff. So played lots around. We did lots of crazy stuff. I mean, we even advised WeWork on their blockchain strategy, which they just wanted to do crazy crypto nonsense. So that just fell to pieces as well. Pandemic happened, and then while that was happening, we were doing interesting things. Andy and I. So Andy used to work with me. He was our I would call him our kind of inventor. He was a bit like me. Let's just go and make some cool stuff. And we started playing with this technology which potentially was doing stuff that nobody had done before with money. So there was a thing called Alchemix, which came along at the time, which, as the name suggests, made money out of nothing. Self-repaying loans were a massive part of that. And while it was definitely quicksand, I think is a nice way to say that, it gave a little taste of the future. And that little taste of the future was then how OPENFORMAT was born, because it was like, okay, well, this technology is early. It's clearly doing something that all the other technology can't do, and still can't do, which is why it's so interesting. But it's so early, what do we need to do? So that's where OPENFORMAT came from. I mean, I could tell you about the crazy bank idea that we came up with, which Sarah may or may not want me to talk about, who knows.
I definitely do, but let's leave that to the end of the conversation. That sounds very interesting.
But that's the basic journey. It's always about tech. It's always about trying to do, what can we do? What's the right thing that we can do? How can we make a positive impact through technology? You know, and again, during the Simple Web days, it was as much about saying no to people as it was saying yes to people, which is how you find your line. It's also how I knew I was never going to be rich, but that's a different thing.
Cool. Okay, so could you just describe then what OPENFORMAT offers right today? What actually is it?
So OPENFORMAT essentially is a way for developers to leverage this new and interesting technology without actually having to worry about how it works, basically. So whether it's an SDK or a set of APIs or whatever the wrapper is for this deep tech, it's just a way to manifest it. It's just a really simple way for devs to go, oh, actually, now I realize what I want to do. Here's an easy way to do it. Clearly, the realizing what we want to do bit is the hard bit at the moment, because this is You know, the age-old conversation at the moment. Oh, I could just do that in a database. It's like, okay, cool. Go, then in which case, go and do that. Like, you know, save yourself some time. If that's as far as your ambition goes, then that's what you need to do. Do that. So yeah, so that's really what it is. Our current focus is on the way that the society, or the technical society, the new generation, if you like, use games as part of their daily lives. You know, all the kids coming out of school, gaming's normal to them. They're all gaming natives. So our focus at the moment is, well, how can we use this stuff, these current behavioral trends, to show off what open format actually does? And that's where we're starting. So really simple stuff: decentralized leaderboards, decentralized assets for whether it's a game or whether it's for an application. So you have portability between different things, if you like. That's our current focus. And then we're going to move on into all kinds of interesting things: microtransactions, new types of money, redistributing wealth, the stuff that everyone thinks is crazy, but is actually coming. So let's get ahead.
Nice. Okay. So you talk about on your website that you're big believers in the open source side. Why is that important to you in open format? You know, because you could easily, there are lots of providers that do this that aren't open source. Why is it important?
If I had a hotline now to Sam Altman at OpenAI, I would ask him the same question, because black boxes are bad for people. You know, you have something running the world, or a massive part of the infrastructure of the world. We really need to know how it works, and we don't. So it's very important that we make sure that people understand how things work, and that's what open source is. You know, come and look at our stuff. Even better, come and contribute to it. And in our case, because one of our aims is to make sure that everybody gets paid for doing the stuff that they do, come and contribute and get paid for it. Even better. Like, imagine open source where you get paid for your work rather than Meta ripping you off. You know, all of Meta stuff is open source, but they don't pay anyone for it. So I think that's very important.
Very true. Okay. I'm just thinking, let's say if I ran an agency, digital agency, had a team of developers that had never built on chain before, I come across open format. What you said before, it's allowing developers to make it easier to get to build. You strip away that complexity. Why is that needed specifically in terms of blockchain? Why isn't it there? Why is it not needed in other technologies? Why do you see a big rise in that?
Okay, so the first thing is, in response to that, it's massively needed in all technology already. So are you a developer? Do you know, do you techie? Okay, so what do you know about TCP?
The protocol?
Yeah, because most developers have no clue that exists. And if they do have a clue about it, you know, their understanding of how packets are transferred from one place to another and then reassembled, they haven't got a clue. Good. Who cares? We don't need to know that stuff. Not really. You know, the people who are maintaining it need to know, but we don't need to know that. So we already have, you know, we've got all these frameworks, we've got all these programming languages for Web2. It's just no different. What's the difference? We don't need to know how these chains work. We don't need to know how they push one thing onto a stack and then push another thing off and then reference something else and then break up into bits and then we don't need to know. Who cares? Does it work? Yes. Is it fast enough? Not yet. You know, is it scaling? Yeah. You know, but these things are happening.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you, okay, but on that though, just to challenge you, how this is compared to other technologies, it is a extremely complex space to be able to build in. How are you abstracting away that complexity and maintaining that? Because this world is changing so frequently from a programming language perspective. Yeah. How are you your SDKs? How are you keeping those up to date and speed? Is that a challenge or not?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course it is. I mean, everything's liquid at the moment. Everything is liquid. You know, 3 years ago, we thought, oh yeah, this is it. Blockchain's matured, kind of thing. And it's like, no, really, that's just not a thing. Everything is still liquid, you know. And one of the things for us is, how can we not worry about that? So how do we abstract it? How do we how do we not care what the chain is?
Mhm.
Like literally, how do we not care? Let's talk to all the chains. Like we'll just create an interface that sits on top of all the chains and says, you don't need to worry about the chain. The protocol is irrelevant. All you need to worry about is what you need it to do and your interface to it. And that's it. And, massive side note, this morning, I created my own blockchain using OpenAI, using ChatGPT-O. And bearing in mind, I haven't tested it, and bearing in mind it's super slim and hasn't got loads of stuff in it. This is all going to change again in the next couple of years. This is all changing. Dynamic applications created in real time by AI, which exist and then don't exist, and we have no clue what's going to happen. So all we can do at the moment is build the cotton wool that kind of sits around it to protect us and to give us some semblance of abstraction but control at the same time.
Yeah.
Hopefully, because I don't know, who knows what will happen, but hopefully.
Nice. So what do you see arise in this in terms of just the developer teams that you see they're using more and more abstracted tools compared to when they used to in any space?
I think
Or not even developers.
well, Bill, and this is one of the interesting things about your comment about no code as well, and low code, and just generally how widespread the innovation is becoming because of how many people are going to be able to pick up these different tools and start innovating. And that's one of the things that I find most interesting when it comes to not only the no code and low code communities that OpenFormat has been partnering with recently, but also just generally using AI to, like, some of the code that Mark's been doing recently, some of the models that Mark's been creating, some of the requests that are then being turned into code immediately, like the level, even over the last week, Mark?
I mean,
the level of
GPT 4.0 has upped the ante again.
Yeah.
Especially
for developer, definitely, or a builder.
Yeah. I mean, I did an experiment over the weekend where I gave it a screenshot of a Machinations model, and it was a really simple model. It was Fortnite basically, and all I said was explain this, which it did perfectly, I might add. And then I said, can you generate me some code to turn this into a proof of concept game, which it did perfectly. Command line, to be fair, but okay, this is interesting.
Okay, this is really interesting topic here of the definition of a builder, right, or a developer. So if we go back, which we will all on this call be aware of, before this time, there was I'd say, much clearer distinction between a category of developer.
Yep.
So you had, I'm a back-end developer and I build databases and infrastructure. I'm a front-end developer, I build the websites and the interfaces. And those two coexisted, but there was always a bit of a supply chain. When a project comes in, it goes down the supply chain of the developer builds the back end of the services and the front end, but then it goes to front end. Years ago, that started to move more into full stacks. You've got much more bigger community where, handled by one person who's a full stack developer, can now basically build a whole application, can build all the infrastructure, building things in Next.js or React. Then you've now got what you're talking about with people like BuildShip or other ones, where actually you can still create extremely complex connectivity between services yourself, but then also build from a full stack perspective intuitive interfaces to be able to interact with all of that. And that's just like Web2, right? But then now we're moving into the blockchain space. What you're talking about in terms of what's important, and my next question is going on to things like gamification and microtransactions, being able to also build those very quickly and easily yourself. You don't need a team of other people. Like, surely that's going to open up so many more ideas to the world, right? Because no one else you're not reliant on other skills to be able to see your idea through.
Yeah, I have many responses to that. I mean, interesting, when I started as a developer back in the 90s, or to be fair, I started when I was a kid in the 70s, but when it was a commercial thing in the late 90s, you did everything yourself. You just figured it out. You were the stack. You were, you figured it out. You were the AI. You had to go and research, try things, iterate, learn, iterate, learn, iterate. We were the neural networks kind of thing. And then over the next 20 years, we then started to have specialisms, you know, so you'd have your front end dev and your UX person and all these different people to facilitate those different parts so that you could build bigger things quicker and blah, 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 blah. Then you have the complexity of new things like blockchain. So now you need another specialist. It's like, well, if I want persistence and immutability, I need this person, and they're going to come in and tell everyone else they're wrong. And oh my, you know, all these kinds of interesting dichotomies. And I think what we're now coming into, when you know, no code has been, you know, I'm going to use the bubble pun, has been bubbling away for the last few years. And I think the next year or so, we're going to peak. We're going to get peak no code as we currently see it, as we currently understand it, with connecting pipes together and accessing APIs and joining existing things together, the Zapier stuff, the build ship stuff, that kind of thing. And this, I hate this word, but this democratization of this stuff is what happened in the music industry, for example. So, you know, music industry, you needed a studio 30 years ago, 40. When I was making music when I was a kid, it cost too much money and you had to save up forever to buy one thing. Whereas now, you know, 15 years ago, anyone with a computer could make anything they wanted. And now we have the most amount of shit music we've ever seen, you know, which is, it's not a bad thing. You know?
Yeah.
The fact that everybody can make music and no art is bad, it's all subjective, blah, 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 you know. But there's a huge amount of noise, and finding the good stuff is now much more difficult, which is why, you know, on Spotify, only 1% make any money, for example. And I think the no-code thing is about to have the same thing. We're about to see a massive explosion of absolute crap apps, which is great. That's such a good thing, because everyone is learning about how to communicate with each other and with computers. However, though, I think in the next couple of years, and it might even be sooner than that, the next set of developers are just going to be AIs. It's just going to, you know, I'm already talking to the team about we should be building our SDKs for robots, not just for people. And I think this is a major thing to be thinking about. You know, if you think, when I first got into commercial web stuff, so I did all the accessibility for the government in the early 2000s. So I did most of the government websites on my own, like Super AI. And the interesting thing about that at the time, this is kind of before CSS, and markup was strong. So we did everything using XML and XSLTs, you know, transformed. I don't remember the acronyms anymore. And it was super logical. It was machine readable. And because it was machine readable, it meant that once you then started getting to accessibility, Google could read it. So the, you know, the great AI in the cloud kind of thing could read all of this stuff, make sense of it, and then use it for its own search engine optimization, blah, blah, blah. But also have to be really good for actually people with disabilities, which was the point. But, you know, and I think we're coming back to that. I think machine readability is coming back into something which is going to change the way that we make things again. And making it machine readable is going to enable the robots. I hate saying robots, and especially keep doing this, but I feel like I've got no choice. The robots will need some rails to enable them to understand what we're doing. Although that may not be true either. I mean, it's accelerating so quickly at the moment. But I do think that's the next step. And then the next step from that is going to be who's auditing all this stuff? Who's keeping track of all these disposable applications? And that's where the blockchain comes in, because the blockchain can keep track of all this stuff and it can be immutable. And if we build that in as part of the fabric, we're in a pretty good place. You know, we at least we'll know what's going on, even if we can't control it.
Yeah. It's kind of the rise as well with the things of like Devin and other tools where they're showing the possibility there of you having a virtual or virtualized team that you can control and work with. And I've never thought about that, not just taking away people skills, but actually how platforms like OpenFormat as well are going to be able to integrate with these tools in the future. I bet hardly any platforms really thinking about. Yes, very interesting. Okay, let's move on to, oh, Sarah, sorry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I would The only thing that I was going to, well, actually a couple of things, if you don't mind. So two things. One is, I think in the context of this video and the audience of BIMA members, this is one of the reasons why this is so important for all agencies to be paying attention. Like, we're not talking about emerging technology that you can choose to pay attention to or not. And I think based on a survey that we did recently and based on some of the responses that we've had, like thinking about how some of these technologies are coming together and what that means in terms of innovation and what that means in terms of building dynamic disposable applications, to Mark's point, like this is very much now. And if agencies aren't thinking about how they use these things and pair them collaboratively in a way that makes sense, that's a mistake because of how much change is happening. Like, we've got this competition that we're doing at the moment, which you know about, Tom. We've got people building Web3 based decentralized applications using no code tools like BuildShip in like a matter of hours, having never built anything before in their lives. Absolutely incredible. So that's just one thing about the audience watching this. It's like the speed of which you're able to do things compared to briefs and processes when I used to run an agency, which is not that long ago, like 6-7 years ago. So I think that's one thing. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention, because I do think it's really interesting, without getting into, and Mark, you know, Mark would be able to say the sentence way better than me in terms of kind of just being articulate around it. But I just think it'd be worth talking briefly about the standards within blockchain-based technologies and what they mean in terms of innovation and people picking up and like building on top of it, without going into kind of ERCs and what they mean. And I know we said we're not going to kind of be really clear about our language and not confuse people, but actually some of the standards that already exist, as well as Mark, I know you've got ideas about standards that you've been thinking about for NFTs. And I think there's something really interesting here within this space right now when it comes to the standards that people pick up and use, especially when the level of acceleration and the volume of people picking up and creating things is just unbelievable compared to any other point in time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's where the name came from, open format. We want formats to be open. We want standards to be open. We want to share, and you know, I can never say this word, interoperable. Oh my God, I did. You know, we want, you know, we want everybody to be able to work together. You know, and because I'm, for me, I always bring it back to music. There's a lot of NFTs, you know, which has become a bit of a dirty word over the last couple of years, or a dirty acronym. Actually is a piece of technology, and as a statement is exceptionally useful to the music industry. Exceptionally useful. But because we use all these horrendous words like wallet, you know, wallet, the most masculine thing ever, you know, like, you know, that it was a man that invented that. We have all these terms, and if one of the big players in the music industry, for example, decided that, well, let's just create a standard, you know, this is another word I can't say, the Fraunhofer Institute, who created the MP3, you know, if we had somebody do that for NFTs, which I would love to be part of, I would love us to instigate that or be part of somebody else doing that. You know, this is not about ego, it's about creating something where we can communicate, and there's a standard. All of a sudden, artists would be making more money, the labels will be making more money, because we're all working together with something that makes sense, rather than us all trying to own our piece of it. You know, this weird greed that we all have for us and our egos to own the things, I think, is the thing that stops this stuff. The technology is just a part of the conversation, really. It's that standard that makes sense. You know, I remember years ago, there was a format based on Microsoft's WMA, Windows Media Audio, I think it was.
Yeah, remember that.
And there was a format called Weed Share, and weed because it spread, not weed because you could smoke it. Like, right. It was you know, spread like a weed. And the idea of this particular format was you could share this music file for free. You'd share it with anybody. You were encouraged to share it. You could listen to it 3 times, and then you had to buy it, or it just wouldn't work anymore.
Oh, wow.
And then if you then shared it with somebody else, and then they bought it, you would get a cut of the sale of them buying it. And that, I think it went 3 deep. I think it was 3 deep. Massively failed because it was Microsoft. It was closed. No one knew how it worked. You had one reseller in each country. It was absolutely nonsense. But the actual idea behind it was good. The technology wasn't ready, and the philosophy wasn't ready. And again, I think that's where, you don't need to get into the tech, the ERC20s and all that. We don't need. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I care about is a way for us to communicate. It's literally communicate, and the relationships that allows us to have. It's as simple as that. And as an agency, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity. It's a massive opportunity to collaborate. It's a massive opportunity to kind of go, okay, well, we need to make money because we're a business. So let's explore how this stuff actually works. And as soon as, and again, this is one of those obvious things to me that might not be obvious to other people, is the beauty of a lot of the blockchain technology stuff is that the rules are in the asset, not in the marketplace. And that's such a huge statement. And by standardizing the rules of the assets so that we all share that and understand it, the amount of wealth that can be distributed evenly, and and again, I don't like using the word fairly because it's subjective, but fairly, I think there's a huge opportunity for that.
So what you kind of did touch on it there. What advice would you give to people watching this who are less familiar with blockchain, have a development team, traditional Web2 development team? What would they do next week to get started into this?
I've got 2 answers to that. The simple answer is go and check out our competition, because it'll make it really easy for you. That's the simple, super promo. But the other side of it is don't be scared of it. It's just technology. It can do stuff that other bits of technology can't do. That's it. If it's too complicated for you, or you don't understand it yet, don't stress about it. Just come and have a look in 6 months.
Yeah.
That's it. Wait until it's ready for you. And I think it is ready. We're at the stage where it's becoming ready, and the use cases are obvious. That's it. Don't be scared.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's I think people who are unfamiliar with it have been previously put off because they're wanting it to be clearly defined, the use cases at that time, so that they can go and use it, and they're not realizing that this is like any other big innovation in technology. The tech has come first rather than the idea with this, and so you've had that rush of the casino side element of it, but then also the rush of people building the technology without an idea in mind to start with, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But we're in this space right now where, like you said, all of the tools are much more accessible than they have been in the past to be able to build on it. But don't try to search for an answer exactly how it can be used. That's for you now to be able to think of an idea and think about how this could potentially solve something differently than it has been possible in the past. And you make the rules around it. Yeah, and I think OpenFormat's fantastic about how you're going to try to break down that vision or that view, I suppose, in this space around holding everything yourself. So making it open source and making it accessible as well to not even developers, to builders that have amazing ideas but can't code. Right, that's the world we're moving into, is what you said. I think is fascinating. Cool. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. Is there any other last points? You mentioned something at the start, Mark, you want to tell us, and a story for later. Is that a quick story?
I don't know. Am I allowed? I'm asking Sarah. Am I?
Are you going to say the name?
Of course I am.
Okay.
So
Brilliant.
I was at a thing many years ago, a few years ago, and it was to do with, that you get these city currencies, like we have the Bristol pound, for example, and and I went to an event and I saw them talking about a new version of this. It really annoyed me. So I just thought, if I was going to come up with a new currency and I was going to look, a new way of helping a local community, you know, but how would I do it? So I came up with the idea of a bank, really simple bank where you lend people. And this is the same time that I found Alchemix, which I mentioned earlier. And basically the idea was we're going to find young people under 25 who wanted to start a business, who couldn't get a loan. And at the time, a friend of my daughter's just had a baby, and her boyfriend tried to get a loan from the local Bristol council, and they wanted to charge him something like 40% interest on a £500 loan, which was absolutely shocking to me, right? So I thought, okay, let's figure this out. So we thought that basically what we do is we lend £1,000 to young people, and they pay no interest and no fees. It's as simple as that, and you pay it back in a year. And what they wouldn't have known, and we didn't actually execute this, but this is one of the things that led to open format, basically. And the idea was that they didn't actually need to pay it back at all, because what we would do is over collateralize their loan, have it running in something like Alchemix in the background, which is actually generating a yield, which would pay back their loan for them. The proof of concept, I might add, worked 100%. We were doing on average, it was a 38% yield APY, which was nuts. Like, people still don't believe me. I think it's still running. I'm trying to get Andy to show me how to access it. So there might be a massive pot of money that we don't know about. But the idea was self-repaying loans, basically. And the name of the bank was called WANC, W-A-N-C. And I'll let Sarah privately tell you what that stands for, because it's an acronym again. We are not, and I'm not going to say it because Sarah told me often. So that was it. So, but that actually, we proved that we could do it. We proved that it would work at the time. We couldn't prove it would scale. We couldn't do any of that kind of stuff. But as a proof of concept of where's the future of money going, this felt like a strong indicator, you know. And, you know, we're seeing all the UBI stuff at the moment. And, you know, again, going back to Sam Altman, he's talking about all this stuff as well. But if this is ever going to happen, I want it in the hands of the people, not in the hands of some guy sitting on top of a pyramid.
Yeah.
You know? And that's where then I start chatting to some of the founders. I was like, Bruce, check this out. What do you reckon? He's like, yeah, I'm in. So we thought, yeah, let's build a bank. And then actually what happened at the time is we started to see a lot of the mainstream lenders doing 0% interest on fixed terms, like 6 months and 3 months. So we kind of thought, we don't need to worry too much about this for now. Let's head off into the craziness of what we could do. And that's kind of where open format came from.
Nice. Brilliant. Well, let's end it there, Mark. Thank you. Some incredible stories, incredible backdrop that you've got behind you there. But no, great to meet you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.